When we advertised this as the future of the Mayor Baba movement, some people wrote me comments that they interpreted this to mean that we were somehow going to be starting religion, laying down canonical principles,
Oh, and you're the head
or
priest?
perhaps I was being fitted, or Merwan was being fitted for a red mitre cap. Mayor Baba said, and all of you know what he said, I have not come to found a new religion. We are not talking about that at all. We're talking about the fact that we're all people, souls, seekers, on a faith journey. And that journey is going from where we are now to where the entire community will go for the next 700 years. And that's we have issues which have arisen in that faith community of all kinds. And that's what this is about. So feel free to explore and comment on anything. But no, nobody here this is not going to be the Council of Trent or anything like that. With that now, I'm honored to introduce our facilitator, Merwan Mehta. I'm not going into his resume. You all know his resume not only for this incarnation, but for the last one.
Couldn't resist.
Could not resist. Could not resist. Okay, Merwan.
I think so. Let's first, since he mentioned the movement, let's take care of that first. Yes, I do believe that word came from me, and it wasn't meant the way it came out. So please kind of make sure we understand when we say movement, it's just to see what all everybody thinks. And the reason for this kind of event came about when we started talking about what do Baba lovers or what do Baba people want, or what do they have to say or interact with each other. At times we kind of are in our own minds, we are kind of thinking about our own things, and we're all devoted people, so sometimes we feel, oh, this is what should be done, this is what should not have been done, and things like those. So we said, why don't we start a kind of a discussion, a dialogue, when we just kind of collect ideas, put them all in a kind of a format that everybody can avail, and then that way we can kind of create other units, smaller units. If some people want to do something, we do that. And that's why when we kind of talked about this event, we said you're going to be here in an individual capacity. It's not that you're representing any kind of organization or any kind of the center or the Sufis or whatever. And that's why we said, well, all of us here are wanting to do something for Baba. And we're all, like Dennis put well, we're on Baba's journey. And so we want to kind of make sure that we support each other in this whole endeavor. And that is the idea for this. And so we said, like my friend John Leiter said, he's very optimistic or very pessimistic about this. And that's a good way to say I'm neutral. But the idea is, the idea is that we have to understand, yes, we have a strong conviction about things. But that doesn't mean that we try to push our conviction on others. Like, you need to, the way I look at this, we need to understand that if the final goal of all this is to become one with God, that doesn't happen in one lifetime. Right? No, you don't agree with me. It's possible. If you're going to achieve it in one lifetime, that's great. But if that's what you believe, and if it's not going to happen in one lifetime, then it is going to take us so much of learning, so much of kind of realization to come to that point. And so we are all on this journey ourselves. And so we have to make sure we communicate with each other and create a path that Baba wants us to kind of follow. And that is why it is a good idea to have some kind of a dialogue going, which kind of helps us come up with better ways. And so that was the whole purpose of this. And so that's why when we came up with this event, we said, I'm going to be the facilitator. My job is going to only collect ideas, let you have a discussion, and I'm going to go over the norms that we're going to follow, so all of us are kind of clear on what we're going to do here. And the idea is, once we come up with those ideas, from that point onwards, we decide what we want to do. And so that's why, let me kind of start with the norms. So I'm going to go over the norms, then we're going to go over, then we're going to say the Parvardigar's prayer, and then we're going to start. So remember, we are here for Baba. Keep a positive attitude and love in your heart. And that is where we are going to start from. The goal today is not to make any decisions or come up with any action items. So it's not that we're going to achieve anything here. It is only to start a dialogue amongst Baba people. All ideas will be documented and distributed for future use, and that's what I'm going to be doing, typing as fast as I can to capture your ideas. We will naturally respect each other. Naturally, one person speaks at a time. Speak openly and without bias. Be fair and impartial. We know we come with some prejudices in our hearts. So be it. I mean, you might be better off expressing a prejudice and saying, that's where I come from. What all do you think about it? And that's the idea here, to kind of make sure that the basis from where we come is kind of validated by each other. So let's make sure we do that. Avoid blaming anyone or any organization. Oh yeah, they didn't do that, he doesn't do that, she doesn't do that. We don't want to kind of get into that. And make sure we stay positive. Once you have made your point that is documented, let's move on. Let's not keep rolling it over and over. Listen to the speaker rather than getting your point ready. And that would be important in terms of listening, because we do have a tendency there to get our point ready when somebody is speaking. So please resist that. Keep an open mind, listen to that, and then whatever comes in your heart, whatever Baba puts in your heart, you can kind of convey that to everybody. Attempt to understand the speaker's point of view. Try to really understand where that person is coming from. Avoid side conversations, and naturally anger and frustration have no use here. So we are trying to keep it as positive as possible and just collect ideas. Challenge yourself to see things differently. Make sure you try to get a different viewpoint. Keep in mind this is to further Baba's agenda, not our own. And in fact, that's a litmus test I've always used in evaluating whenever somebody does something. Whenever somebody does something, you kind of say, is it promoting Baba's agenda? Is it moving forward with Baba, what Baba wants us to do? And if the answer is yes, whether you like it or not, it's worth undertaking. And then we added a few more cell phones on vibrate, and keep confidential information confidential.
I have one thing to say, and that is that at this juncture, where we find ourselves denuded of Mandali and of elders that had met the Master, and there's so much talk, and I believe legitimately so, efforts to acquire archival information and secure them for future generations, that there's a pervasive and growing tendency to approach Meher Baba in terms of his historicity and to worship him as the man God, or the God man rather. And all that, as far as Baba said, not my opinion, it means nothing. Meher Baba said, is a direct quote, all religions begin as an attempt to perpetuate the memory of the Master. That's a 100% direct quote from Meher Baba. No one ever quotes it except for me. And what? I'll get that for you, don't worry. It's a definite quote. And fact is, it's concern that you expressed, Merwan, that others expressed, Dennis expressed, about the starting of religion. The fact is, Baba himself said where religions begin, as an attempt to perpetuate the memory of the Master. That includes Avatar. So, Baba clearly stated that what he wanted us to do, in fact, in 1962, when he said goodbye to the Westerners at the East-West Gathering, according to Charles Haynes and others, the last thing he expressed, which really was the final message to the Western world, was, how would you rather see me? As I am now, in terms of his personal beauty, or as I really am, the one behind the maze. And no one had the temerity to answer. And Anita Vayad thought she could charm Meher Baba. And she said, oh, beloved Baba, could both ways, Baba. And Baba said, not so fast, No, I want only that you strive to see me as I really am. Baba said that is the only reason I came and suffered as the avatar. Whatever I did in this incarnation is that you share my consciousness. And that is what we must focus on now, tomorrow, 100 years from now, 70 years from now. That's the only thing that Mayor Baba is concerned with. Everything else is of no importance. Thank you.
I'll take the microphone.
Thank you very much.
So I'm still not clear. So what is the point you're trying to
The
make?
point is, we are here to awaken to Mayor Baba's consciousness, not to worship him. In fact, another direct quote, he said, do not worship me. Worship conceals me. True love reveals me. As soon as we put Mayor Baba on the pedestal as someone who is totally beyond, that we can never attain his greatness, we have lost the whole meaning of Mayor Baba's come, and we've created a religion. He came as a conduit to bring us to share in his consciousness. He said it over and over and over again throughout his incarnation. I want you to share in my consciousness. I want you to become what I am. That is my point. We are totally ignoring Mayor Baba's wishes.
Okay. So do not worship me, share in my...
Love me. He said, true love reveals me. Worship conceals me. Baba's direct quote, not my opinion. I'll find a quote for you. He said, do not worship me. Worship conceals me. True love reveals me.
So so I'm still not getting your point. What
My
is-
point is, we don't have to concern ourselves with much, really. All we have to do is live Baba's life. Actually live it.
Live Baba's life.
Yes.
Okay.
And everything else will take care of itself just organically. We have to become our own higher self. That's what Baba came to awaken us. That's why it says on his samadhi, it says, I've come not to teach, but to awaken. To awaken what? To awaken us to his state of consciousness. That's it. That's the end of the story. Let's go home.
So
Well, if that's the way it works out, then that's the way it works out. We'll go home.
so is that what you're saying? Is that we don't want to share Baba's message with
We don't
others?
want to pay attention to Mayor Baba's message. We want to do everything but what he's asking us to do. We want to sing songs about him. We want to write plays about him. We like to do oddies. We like to make pilgrimages. Baba himself said, again in the East-West Gathering, unless you have the love for each other, in your own groups, all the miles you spent in my name are zero. All the money you've spent in my cause is nothing at all. All the books you write about me are of nothing. And all the places you built to contain me are of someone else. And all the statues you make of me, he said, are of someone else. Baba couldn't be clearer. The fact that we must heed his central vision of what he wants. And that's the last thing, none of us are doing that. That's the
Okay,
thing
so
that
you want people to do that. That's it.
I want things to do. Baba wants people to do that.
So you quoted me in the beginning, which was being optimistic and pessimistic. And Ira actually touched on a point of pessimism, but in an optimistic way, which is
Always a lawyer.
Baba himself, being the knower of the past, the present, and the future, has his future and our future firmly in his hands. And so there's a fair statement to make that all we need to do is be patient and open, and he will reveal. So I understand that, but the other part of it is that I like the fact that we get together and share our thoughts with Baba. And even if it's about the future, you'll get a kick out of it. And then what does, Adi used to say, man proposes and God disposes. So I think we're probably at that stage right now that we're proposing. And we'll see how Baba wants to dispose.
I'm feeling is, a lot of times we've seen this when we say, leave it to Baba. Now, Baba said, leave it to me. But before that, he said, do your best. And then leave it to me. So in a way, Baba also wants us to make sure that we have come together and put in our best. And then we are leaving it up to Baba. And so I've always gone with that. I said, yes, leaving it to Baba is fine. But before that, we have to do our part also. Okay. Who's next?
When I went to my first Baba meeting, this was back in the 60s in New York City, which was the Monday night group. And I was kind of predisposed against religion because I had seen that, you know, what had happened in the name of religion over the centuries. So I kind of went in there a bit skeptically. But when I was sitting at the back of the meeting, and it was very powerful, but when I was looking at the people in there, and these were mainly old followers of Bob, there weren't many young people there. What's that?
Just like you.
Yeah. Well, we got a young guy over there, Bob Underwood. He's 27. But the thing that struck me, looking at this room, is that this was like a gathering of independents. They were all, I could kind of sense, this was not a group that had a hierarchy to it. They might have had some functioning, but they were like just a group of independents. And I felt very good about that. It seemed very wholesome. It wasn't like what I would imagine most spiritual groups to be like. And one of the things that I see that's a danger in the future is that this whole Baba movement is going to be organized. And it's very hard to organize. Then there's going to be a hierarchy of functioning in these groups. But what often happens, it becomes a hierarchy of importance. You know, so someone is in this position, someone is below that position, and it gets to be a bit hierarchical, and then it becomes like a church eventually. If we could be together and function where you have people that are in charge, like Dennis is in charge here, you know, he's the president and everything, but he's not any more important than the other people that help out, to keep everybody at the same level.
That's
Even
not
though
what
the,
he says.
what's that?
John, I have never said anything to the contrary. If you want violence at this meeting, you won't say anything.
Yeah. I haven't interviewed anybody below him, but but what happens is that, you know, that one-on-one with Baba gets kind of lost, so that as time goes on, you get a Catholic Church. If you don't obey the church, you're disobeying Jesus. I mean, how did this entity get to be like a corporation, a personality of its own? If you don't follow the church, you're not following Jesus, you see? So that I see in the future, as things get organized and more people are being drawn to Baba, how can we proceed without it becoming hierarchical in a sense of importance, rather than just service or function? Anyway, that's what I see, where roles become more, people become their roles and they lose their, just being themselves. You follow?
Yes. I guess I captured your thought saying, how can we proceed without creating this into a religion? Essentially, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
That how can we still maintain that one-on-one with Baba and
Yeah.
still not create as a religion?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is a true challenge.
Yeah.
And so, yes,
Yeah.
that's essentially why we are having this discussion. And that's I think what you were
a
saying is not
hierarchy.
very
If
different.
you can put hierarchy in there, that's even like I say, a business has a hierarchy, but it doesn't have to be a hierarchy of importance. Because Baba said, one of my favorite quotes of Baba is where it says, "Everyone is first in importance, and no one is second." That's the paradigm.
Yes,
Yes.
Danny.
So this conversation reminded me of a conversation I had with Dick Anthony, who's somebody I think probably a lot of you folks know in here. I was out in California with him a couple of years ago, and he told me about a conversation he had with Erich, and it was really about the same topic. And he told me that he asked Erich one day, he said, and I'm going to quote Dick, he said, "It seems to me that every time the avatar comes, there are three distinct phases to that. That the first phase is when the avatar is physically present, at which time there's a charge to that, and people are really drawn to that and that very enlivened by that experience of his presence. When the avatar drops his body, that's the second phase, is that when the close disciples are still there and people are kind of, that they're still experiencing his presence, but it's being channeled through a different medium. And he said the third phase is when the close disciples are gone, And he said that's the phase when things start getting rigidified and organized and all the kinds of stuff we're talking about here. And he said that's also the time that the spirit gets squeezed out. And he was saying to Erich, he said to Erich, this is my understanding about how it works. And he said, what do we do about that? And he said that Erich responded to him. He said Erich got very severe with him. And Erich said to him, Baba was adamant that that not happen in his advent. So Dick said, okay, fine, but how do we keep that from happening? And what Dick told me is that Erich's response was, the way you prevent that from happening is by gathering in small groups to share your mystical experiences, which I thought was one of the more extraordinary things I'd ever heard coming from Erich. And Erich actually asked Dick to write a book about that subject, which I think he's still working on. But I think it's directly relevant to this conversation.
So, Merwan, you were talking about our path, or how, what is our path? How do we create this path? And I thought of Baba's quote, "This path is a no path of self-effacement." And I can't efface myself. Only Baba can do that. And Baba, my experience is that Baba does that by bringing experiences to my life that create that self-effacement, as much as I struggle against it. And so what can we do to help each other, I believe, is create an atmosphere and situations where we remember Baba, because that's the one thing that he seems to emphasize over and over again is remember me, think of me, love me. In doing that, keeping in mind that he's the doer, not us. And so we're giving complete freedom, complete latitude to every other person to work it out in a way that suits them, and Baba working through them. Thanks.
I like what Jeff said, and I feel the same way. We just came back from Australia, and we were so impressed by the people there, not just the Baba lover, how kind and undefended and helpful and loving they were. And it was just so amazing to us to find that. And so I faced myself and said, I've been working on myself internally. How do I love Baba more? How can I love him more? And how can I be a kind person like that I found there? And so I feel it's a very personal thing with Baba, our relationship with Baba, and how we let Baba awaken us. So I would go to Baba's room and say, Baba, how can I become a better person? And when I came home, I realized I'm part of that group here in Myrtle Beach or anywhere in the States, and it really starts with me. Sometimes, we see each other constantly, and we don't always pay attention to each other. I don't. I see somebody say hi, but I don't smile, or I'm not right in that moment. And so I felt this is really starting with me, how we love Baba more, and how, like what he said, or Jeff, I'm not good in big groups. I'm amazed about myself that I even speak up right now.
This is a small group.
No, this is big. This is big for me. I like small groups where I can share my very private inner thoughts. And I have not felt safe in Myrtle Beach to do that because there's so much gossip. And so I say something, next day somebody else quotes me a little different. And so, but I'm saying it really starts with me in being open and having that courage to, and not care about what other people say, because I am myself, and I know what I'm saying, and I believe in myself. So if some other say something bad about me, that's okay, because I know myself, who I am. And so I guess the point is, it starts with us, that whole movement, and that in the very personal relationship with Baba, and having the confidence to share it openly with others. Like the quote of Baba, love is self-communicating. It just keeps going when we give it.
Mhm. Good. May I respond for a few minutes here? I wanted to respond.
Okay, I wanted also, she said something very important.
Okay,
She
what did
not
I
only
miss?
said, she said she doesn't feel safe sometimes in sharing in a Myrtle Beach Baba community because of the gossip. So I think that also has to be put in here.
Okay, just a minute, yeah. I kind of hear what you're saying, what all of us are saying, that our relationship is one-on-one with Baba, and I truly agree with that. The issue here also is, if you come to the center and go and stay in the cabin for the first time, for the first few times, everything looks good, the cabins are well maintained, the path is nicely, done, all these flowers are growing. It's a beautiful thing, right? Everything looks very good. But we have to understand and realize that there's a whole big organization that has to be there to make it happen. So somebody is creating this environment where we can enjoy all that, right? And so yes, on one side we are saying we have a one-on-one relationship with Baba and it's all about love. But then at the same time, we have to figure out how we're going to get organized, how we're going to get the things done that have to be done to make sure all of us keep enjoying that environment. And that's the same thing. In fact, once if you have a chance to get on the board, you will realize it's just not that everything is hunky-dory. There are lots of issues that come up that somebody has to decide upon. Same thing with the circle, right? Where's Dennis, right? You have to
Ask John, he's the expert.
So, well, my whole point is, yes, it is good to have that one-on-one relationship with Baba. I mean, it's the same thing with Baba, right? I mean, if you read about Baba, Baba was doing the things, what he was doing on one side. But then, Baba also needed finances to make the things happen that had to happen. And so, and then Adi was the kind of doing the personal things that Baba wanted. But Merchi was on the other side trying to get the financing and all that going, because all that also has to keep moving. So it's not enough for us to say, yes, the relationship is between us and Baba and everything else will be taken care of. Because and that's why the major discussion here is, okay, so what can we do so that we are aware of both these sides? And that way, more of us can benefit from what Baba has brought to us.
And Merwan, do you sense there's a problem? And is that why you wanted to have this meeting? I'm a little confused as to why you wanted to have this meeting, and do you sense there's a problem of some sort?
No, okay, good, very good. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay, the idea was just not mine, it was kind of you often say, well, let us have this dialogue started. So we can talk about the things we're talking right now. So in a way, yes, a lot of you understand the relationship you have one-on-one with Baba, but then also there have to be some things done to keep the whole thing moving for the next 50 years, next 100 years, next 700 years, right? And so we are saying, okay, what is the best kind of an organization we can create, or is there something we can do?
Being proactive.
And so maybe there's nothing we can do, and if that's the consensus we come up with, that, I mean, that would be not my kind of preference, because being of a proactive kind of a nature, I would like to do something that is going to lead into something that at least tells me that I'm on Baba's path, or I'm doing what Baba wanted to be done. And so that was the whole reason for having this kind of a dialogue. And I believe such kind of a dialogue should be there every 6 months or maybe every year or something like that. So at least we come and talk, or maybe even more often. You're all in Myrtle Beach anyway, so you can just come and kind of talk about these kind of things. And the more you talk, the better idea you'll get. And I mean, these things are also good also. If there's an issue of not feeling safe because of gossip happening in Myrtle Beach, yeah, we need to do something about it. I mean, Baba said backbiting is bad. Gossip is bad. That kind of brings down. In fact, when I do my work with companies, I insist, I tell employees that do not backbite. I mean, it is our general nature to backbite. But that brings down a family, that brings down an organization, that brings down a country. That might bring down the whole Baba kind of efforts we are having here also. So the idea is, the more we talk, the better we will feel about exchanging ideas. And sometimes we can talk about our prejudices, we can talk about the things we constantly have in mind. And I guess that was the idea, to create a kind of a safe space where we can exchange these kind of things and feel good about it. Yes, sorry.
Oh, it's great. I don't know how relevant this is, but I actually wanted to say something. I think that we do miss the point that there has been organization here. There's always been some organization. When Elizabeth and Narina, and when they put the center together, it was organized. There has been a hierarchy of people managing and organizing and planning and executing everything. So, and it exists everywhere where there's any level of success in a society. We are, first we're human beings walking this thing, and we have to manage the physical, gross reality that we're living in. So, this idea that we're all on one level and we're all equal, Baba, that wasn't right to begin. That's not true to begin with. We're all heading towards the same goal. We all came from the same beginning, but we're at different stages, some of us, than others. And I think that's okay. I don't think there's a problem with any of that. When I picked my 13-year-old son up today from sahavas, it was his first sahavas. Oh. This is what's important, okay? This kid had a ton of problems in his life. He has been abandoned by his mother, who's, and left with me and my son, who is not his father. He has tons of emotional, a month ago he was at school and he'd been fighting with the mother because she was leaving them. And he had literally said to the principal that he wished he had killed himself the night before. He got in my car and said, "I have been washed clean." Wow. 5 days on the center with people that love Bob. Okay? It's important that some of these structures exist. It's important that we are able to grow that new humanity. It's important that we find a way to do it in the most kind and loving, open way we can, embracing all of our children. We have children that come from California, we have children that come from Chicago, we have children that come from Australia, we have children that come from England. When they get to the center, you know what? They're all Baba children. They are not separate entities coming from separate groups or arguing about anything. And they have the most love there. And that I think there's a lesson we need to take from that. He met all these people. He said that, and this is not someone who talked about Baba. He went to, stuff, and he hung out at the center, and mostly it was about playing. At that age, they just play. They don't care about God. They just playing. But, Baba's there. So today, he actually had the discourses in his hand. So I started reading this. I was like, oh my God, you're going to make me cry again. I started reading this, and, he even said Baba sent him the perfect kid. The first day he met this 18-year-old kid, and he said at the end of the day, he felt like a different person.
Wow, awesome.
And so the things that we do matter, and they're not just mattering for us now, but they're mattering for, we're talking about the 50 years and 100 years, and that's why this is important, Merwan, and I appreciate you doing it, because we do need to think about it. And for me, I've said this more than once, I came to Bob at 14 years old. And having those people, Elizabeth and Kitty and Jane and Margaret Crass and all the people that I used to go and, be with all the time, having those people present and available was very powerful for me. It wasn't like me just finding Baba on my own and opening up to God's love. We all need that support and direction and kindness. And Baba talks about goodness and kindness, and we really need to get on board with that.
Thank you for coming. Good. This is very important that we have this. We do need to dialogue. I think it's very important. And with Baba, for a silent master, he certainly dialogued with his discourses that he gave to his followers about love, and I think it's very healthy to dialogue. And you mentioned about the backbiting and the safety. And I'm part of the board here at the Circle of Friends, and we have an Effort and Grace meeting on Sundays, which is a bunch of Bible lovers sitting around discussing a book that's very much about life hurts and trauma. And people share some under the surface issues. It's sort of it's superficial, but a little more. And that's important. That's a very healing group. It's a profound group, and we have fellowship afterwards. And I think it was Dan that mentioned, and you gave a talk here a couple of months ago about groups. You were in consultant groups, and I asked you the question, I said, how with Bible lovers knowing in the repentance prayer that backbiting creates bad cause, because it's cause and effect. And we love Baba, but he's mentioned somewhere that his karma is karma. The law, so if you do the wrong thing, Baba's not going to pull a magic wand. It's cause and effect. And that's if people understood cause and effect, non-Bible lovers, the world would be more loving. We create our environment. So I asked you the question, how can Bible lovers backbite? I've seen it, I've been part of it myself, that knowing it's psychological, it's a bad cause. You're keeping yourself on earth. You want to get out of here, and you're also hurting an evolving community. You said it's impeding. That's why we're having this. And you mentioned it's wounds. I won't forget that you've been around Baba groups and you've seen a demographic of the Baba community that's very wounded, more than other groups. And I thought about that. I know Baba lovers are very, I mentioned I had some issues in the family, my own childhood coming to Baba through the pain. I came to Baba, and somebody mentioned at the Southeast Gathering that a lot of Baba people have been through a lot of trauma. There's a lot of, and so the key I wanted to share that is, it's very humbling that we're here. I mean, I'm 20 years with Baba. And when I first came to Baba, I saw the Baba lovers that were since the 60s, and I saw how happy they are, and here I am struggling. I had all these issues, addiction, depression, anxiety, and he's healed me. It's real. I mean, I'm choosing to be happy every day, because I have to be there as part of the Circle of Friends. I represent happiness. I want to help people that are suffering. I need to stay strong. So I think the key is that if we individually can work on our wounds, individually work, take a look at health, the outer, the collective is a reflection of the solo. So if we individually can work on our wounds, and I know it takes time, but if we can really choose to all work on ourselves, then I think it's going to help the great, because we have to help the youth. This is a tough time. I have a nephew right now suffering with addiction. He's 113 pounds now. He was like almost 200 pounds, and he's suffering with heroin addiction. My mother called me today. A lot of youth are hurting. This is a tough time for youth, and he could use spirituality, and we have to set the model. So I just wanted to share that this is very important, that we dialogue, we have more of these, and that we create a safe space, and that we can take, and it's a very humbling The one thing I will say, being in human form, it's very humility. Because you're here, you think you're so great, I think I'm so great, what the heck you doing here? Unless you chose to be here, so I just wanted to share that, thank you.
When I heard about this gathering, my mind went in a completely different direction from what we're talking about. I actually think the Mayor Baba movement today is fine, and I don't see any problem. And we all have our individual problems and so on. But as a group, as a community, as a center, and so on, I think things are going well. The only thing that's lacking, and this is where my mind went, is we don't have a growing population of young people. And so where I went was how that may change. So they say only fools predict the future, so I'm going to try to predict the future. So, if you go back and think about, if you ask Kitty and Elizabeth, like around 1960, how do you think the Merwan movement is going to unfold in the next 10 years? And they would not have guessed that it's because people were going to be taking LSD,
Right.
and Mayor Baba is going to give a response and a communication to our generation. And so many of us are, the results of the hippie generation, the love and peace generation, and psychedelic experiences, which kind of imitated in some way spiritual experiences and got us interested in spirituality. Okay, so this is where I'm interpolating into the future, and not that we can do anything per se, but this is where I think things are going to go. So if you look at the younger generation today, they're glued into technology, they're glued into cell phones. And there's new technologies that are emerging that I think are potentially going to be able to create spiritual experiences or mimic something like that. Particularly, it's the convergence of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and biofeedback. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but virtual reality basically is wearing goggles and you have an experience of being somewhere else. And it potentially is a very powerful medium. When you couple that with artificial intelligence, which will be able to know your thoughts and your feelings, which is not far-fetched. I just watched a TED Talk this morning about a researcher at Stanford who's doing things like that. I mean, there's all sorts of things happening. You couple that with biofeedback and artificial intelligence, there's going to be, and even they're talking about potentially implants into the brain where you can communicate directly between computers and the brain. Potentially, we're going to have a very different type of world 20 years from now, 10 years from now. So with this technology, like any technology, could be used for good, it can be used for bad. And it's probably both will happen. Even LSD has its positive use, as Baba said, like in therapeutic situations. So if this technology does manifest, then it's going to cause potentially people to seek out higher truths. Because it's going to give them perhaps glimpses the way LSD did, or maybe worse than that, maybe people will be subject to mind control, who knows. So anyway, that potentially could lead to the type of influx of younger generation coming in reaction to the coming technologies. So again, as we are as a group, I don't see any great problem, but except for the fact that we don't have a younger generation. Or what we do have is a very small younger generation.
Does this work? What I would like to see, and I've thought about it for a long time, is I see these youth sahavas, and I thought, I would even reincarnate to get into that youth sahavas. I would like to have these ones that have been going through to give us in the community here, or whoever else wants to come, a sahavas, where they will, they'll be like the adults, I just think, it's like, I thought of it a long time, and I thought it's a darn good idea, somehow. Anyway, I'd like to see it happen. It'd be a good, wonderful, humbling experience.
And yeah, you said about the sahavas. The way I look at it, this is no different than a sahavas.
Yeah.
This is actually an adult sahavas. We are adults are trying to get together and exchange ideas. What could be different than a sahavas?
Well, they stay up all night. The kids get
Now they are younger, they can afford to do that. Yesterday I went. We can. You can.
We have the place till 11 p.m.
Well, yesterday my daughter took me to the gym, and I was exercising with her for half an hour, and I am still hurting. And she is doing fine there.
You're young.
So
Okay.
what do you see,
I think we
that
have.
you would like to see manifesting to help the Baba movement go forward?
Well, I truly do not, I mean, I'm with you and on all what we have said. I am one-on-one with Baba. I believe there's no need for any intermediary because there is always a direct relationship between us and Baba. But I have felt, and in fact, when we were talking about it during our times on the board also, that it is very essential to bring the youth in. There's no question about that. I've always felt the youth sahavas is a very good investment in terms of the center's resources, and that we need to encourage there, that we need to see if we can get more people involved, and maybe some disturbed kind of a youth. Is there a way that maybe bring those disturbed youth into the movement? Maybe they're not involved with Baba, but just can we bring some disturbed people and then just show them around, just keep them with keep them in the Baba environment, and that would be the way to go. The thing is, I've always known that sometimes just a simple thing that we learn or hear from somebody changes a person's life. And we don't realize that sometimes, right? I mean, somebody says something and just, yeah, you should do that. And that person goes ahead and does it and changes that person's life. So we never know what effect we will have on others. And so if we can contribute in some ways, especially in the lives of the youth, we should kind of try and do that. But truly, this is no different than a sahavas. I mean, that was our, in fact, John and I have been talking, and Arsenio for a long time, that we should have something like this going, where we just bring people together and just have an exchange of ideas. Maybe if you think this group is too big, maybe we make it into smaller groups and then have a discussion. The idea is to share each other's ideas, and at the same time, make sure we adhere to what Baba has said about these things. I mean, backbiting has come up quite a few times. But how many times do we remember that that's not a good thing to do? Or other things that Baba has said also. But, and then the best way, I feel the best way to promote what Baba has said is to live it and show people this is the way things are done. So if you can do that, that will be the best way to do.
This is my thought when I was talking about the sahavas and the young people, you know, and talking about Elizabeth and Kitty and the different things, and even when Rick was talking about what happened in the 60s, we all got exposed on some level to Baba. We all got exposed through someone at my high school that had a pamphlet, or someone somewhere that had, and so we are not doing those things, you know, and most of us are not out, you know, talking about Baba. As a matter of fact, it's become quite a closed communication issue about Baba. You know, Baba is not out there in the forefront of what's happening in most communities. People that are Baba groups don't open their doors and, you know, here you're doing it at the Circle Center, but that's not happening around the country. So my thought, when we talk about the Baba movement, and you're talking about young people and you know, even the idea about working with the kids with drug addictions, is we need to get out there and do some of that. We have to start becoming a part of the world that we're living in. And we need to be doing something. And Baba told us to spread his message of love and joy. I mean, we were supposed to do that. You know, I mean, it's even part of the center charter to spread Baba's message, you know, so I think that's an important thing we need
Absolutely.
to think
Well,
about. How do we
yeah.
do that?
I totally agree with that. In fact, Baba's, if you see Baba's, the symbol that Baba uses, it says mastery and servitude. And that is the whole idea there. So Baba wants that kind of a service. And we've been talking about service along, and that's why this circle is a great kind of a way that you started. And I'm sure you're supplementing the center in a big way, because helping the center also do those service projects. And the center has that kind of in their charter also. But then this is a great opportunity. And when we're talking about the country, Myrtle Beach is in a way Baba's capital. So in a way, what we do here really will make a difference all over. And in fact, at some point the goal might also be how do we start this kind of a discussion and have other centers involved, the LA Center or maybe Merwana or other, maybe Chicago, all those. And then at some point, how do you also start communicating with the India people there? How do you kind of make sure that, because everybody is in Baba's court, we kind of all progressing towards that one goal. And so it kind of behooves us to kind of exchange ideas and move in that common direction. And in fact, the Sufis also, the same thing with the Sufis. I mean, they're also moving in the same direction. So it kind of behooves us to see how we can kind of partner and do these kind of things.
We have
It's going to sound a little bit like a summary, because I think the first place to start is, you know, with ourselves and developing love. Because that's the thing that's important, is love. Didn't Darwin say love has soul importance or something? And, you know, soul significance, that's right. Thank you, Kim. So that's where we have to start with ourselves, but then we have to support that love in each other. And that's when we have to start reaching out to each other more and caring for each other, because that's how we manifest love. Love just doesn't sit there in you. It's a very active thing. It has to manifest in caring. And so then how best to do that is to work with each other. I mean, that really gets it really well, because when you work with someone, you have to listen to them, and you have to, it's not all about you. You're listening and you're trying to find the best way. And that's the important thing. And it's only through listening to other people that you can really find the best way. I mean, it doesn't just come from one place. We're all got God in us. So we need to hear what everybody has to say, because we're listening to God from all these different perspectives, and then we get the whole picture. And this is what you were saying, this is a very important thing to do. And as for young people, I think if we started really manifesting love and caring, I think the young people would come. I mean, it's such an attractive thing, seeing someone that really has love and someone that really cares. How could they not be drawn to it?
Thank you very much, Merwan, for doing that. And I think it was necessary, actually, to bring it up, because I had some difficult time with some people who, unfortunately, because of my career, they had taken advantage of my time and have used me to show them houses and all that for hours and hours and make an appointment and so forth. And then they decided that they're going to go and contact the realtor themselves and buy it, or basically find another place and go. And I just want to mention, and I'm bringing it up because as a Baba lover, I feel that I should have a self-respect for myself. Self-respect is part of a spirituality. If you don't have it, basically you can't love others. So in order to go to the higher step of self-effacement, you have to first respect other people's time and their effort, because nothing is free in this world. And if you do not agree, then you have to come back and pay for it in another lifetimes. So I guess most of the people here are retired, so they are not have to work. But my situation is as such that I have to bring income and put it on the table, bread on the table. And honestly, I don't like to be taken advantage. And I hope that everybody else don't take advantage of anybody else. And perhaps one of the reasons that the young people are not coming or getting involved with this community, because it has been the norm in the past. You have to pay their whatever they work for you. And one suggestion, that if you want to bring younger people in, why don't you suggest babysitting? If you have a little community of people, say that, okay, younger people, for example, from New York or San Francisco, they have little children and they want to stay at the center and they want to go to the Baba meeting or something, so-and-so is feeling lovingly, to have a babysitting, available for them. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I love these group meetings, and unfortunately, I don't seem to be as involved, like getting to the center, to the poetry meeting, or the discourse meeting, or this Darwin's book meeting. But these are all places where people could share in small groups to share their hearts with each other and their experiences with Baba. But what I've mostly been able to get to are the center programs on the weekends. And for years now, I've encouraged the powers that be, if there are any on this level here, that we form small groups after the film and put the chairs in a circle, and that would include both the old timers. That was sort of a pun, I guess, here, but also the people that have been with Baba for a while, and the children that sometimes come to the center, and we'd all be in one circle, and we could share about our experiences with the subject of the film, possibly. And that would be half the meeting. And it would give the older people a chance to share with the younger people. And it would, and I know that goes on informally at the center, but that, I feel, is really the way to increase the percentage of younger people in the community. Because if it keeps going like this, there will be no more. You said we need to breed. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. I mean, Baba, but it's like the children and the grandchildren aren't necessarily active in the Baba community. But I think if we had these small groups, sharing groups, more frequently, that would definitely attract them. Some of the best times I have in the center are at the caretakers retreat, and we do that like once a year, and we put the chairs in a circle, and people really share from their hearts there. It's just wonderful. But why do we do this only once or twice a year when we could do it every week like that? And the thing about mysticism there, that goes right along with sharing from my heart, my own personal life and experiences with Baba. Mysticism and a direct relationship with God is like the opposite of organized religion. And when that kind of sharing isn't encouraged or is suppressed, then organized religion, caste, dogma, creed, ceremonies, rites, that starts to take over. And I know I've gotten some kind of reaction when I try to share what is going on with me personally. So it isn't always easy. Some people, you know, well, I don't mind people laughing, but some people say, well, you can't say that, or that's not right. You know, that doesn't go, that's the wrong opinion about things. But of course, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and especially in a kind of mystical experience. Whatever our personal experience is, the more personal it is, the more, quote, mystical it is. But I think to encourage that that's how we avoid. I mean, ultimately, it will probably turn into some kind of organized religion, and then it'll be time for the avatar to come again. But we want to retard that as much as possible. Then, besides this mysticism and sharing with each other and with the youth, technology is, you know, that's how young people are communicating. And again, for some time, I've encouraged webcasting the programs at the center. And that would, you know, that's a wonderful kind of way to inform people of all generations of what's going on. And Robin, who is doing a wonderful service in that regard. So, and that's where the youth are probably there. They're listening to that. So we could do a lot more in that regard. I'll just finish up by saying I'm really happy that so much of our Baba literature is online. And I post stuff on Facebook, and I've got Baba friends and non-Baba friends on Facebook. So I'm always happy to cite things in our literature that are online so that the non-Baba friends can find out more. Thank you.
This could be triggering for you guys, so hold on to your seat. So I think everyone here has said some very valid points, and I think everyone's heart is so genuine. It's nice to see that. And thank you, Merwan, for putting this on. But there's so many different points of discussion here, and there's so many different ways to look at this. Just responding to like what Richie said about breeding. I think in the West, you know, much of the young culture has been destroyed, especially children of hippies from the 60s. Family values was not a strong suit. So we do have a lot of Baba youth, but they were, how do I want to say that? A lot of them weren't encouraged in the right ways in terms of relationships, in terms of family values, in terms of traditional values. I think a lot of the young people today want that, and they're not getting that. I think one of the contributions we can make within the Baba world is bringing some of the strengths from the East to the West, from India and from Iran, and bring that and help some of these younger kids. Yes, the use of sahavas I think is a wonderful thing. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, but I think it depends. You know, for some kids, they go there, they don't get as much information as they want about Meher Baba. Or there's a focus on gender confusion without a reflection on Meher Baba. They're bringing their stuff from their schools, from their high schools, from their colleges, which is really based on cultural Marxism, okay? And the breakdown of the family, which has profound effects. And so that's one of the reasons why Baba kids, you know, they come from a lot of broken homes. A lot of people in here have kids who don't participate. So I think before you talk about sharing love, I think you got to look at your own families first. And I think you got to look at maybe mistakes and how not to dwell on them in terms of like blaming ourselves, but how do we prevent that in the future? How do we actually make some positive changes? So there's a lot of things to look at. A lot of Baba kids, I was born in a Baba family. okay? Most of you weren't. Most Baba kids don't want to hang around Myrtle Beach or Mehrabad, India. Why? Because you can't make a living, all right? Those are two, Baba's homes are usually in places where there's not economic opportunities. So a lot of Baba kids are really focused on, you know, going out and making money. That's great. There'll be sort of a donor class maybe in the future. Maybe on peripheral, they'll come to the center once a year or something like that. And that's all very valid. But the meat and potatoes of it, the people that are there doing the work, and I think several of you touched on that today, you need those people there. And I think one of the key things, and this I learned from Vladimir Putin, and this, because in intelligence, when you study intelligence, it's the theory of decision support, okay? And counterintelligence is countering those threats that are coming to you. And when Vladimir Putin was in the KGB and he was in East Germany, they would war game all the time, all the different possibilities that could happen. And the KGB basically realized that at some point they ruled out thermonuclear war, really, as a 1 through 10 option. They found that the first option was a threat from within, okay? And that's exactly what happened. You had people eventually swayed and this and that. But the important part, and this is where Vladimir Putin played a role, was that he was part of the inner onion. And the idea was that the Soviet Union could collapse, but the culture of Russia, the spirituality, the religion, the faith, the values would be maintained. And I think going forward in the Baba world, there's something to be learned from that. Because right now, I mean, I think if you look at the world, Russia has become a beacon of spirituality, and it's really moving forward in terms of peace and development in the world. But how do we learn from those examples? How do we maintain the culture of the mandala? How do we maintain the culture of just being here and doing this and sharing and loving and all these different things? And I think part of that, I think there's just constant opportunities. And I think, for example, right now, you know, the center in India, they're trying to figure out, well, how do we do, you know, how do we get from A to Z? Okay, well, we need to get the professionals involved. Professionalism is great. There's a lot of strengths and benefits to professionalism. But there's also a counterbalance to sort of spontaneity and bringing in young people and not being exclusive and not focusing just on professionalism. So you have to be natural with this stuff. And that's part of maintaining the culture. That's part of maintaining the dialogue. A lot of Baba kids go to youth sahavas, they go off to college, they get brainwashed by college. Then they're off in their professional careers. Then they hook up with someone who's not a Baba lover. Then they get pregnant and have a kid, and it's game over. Maybe 10 or 15 years later, they come back to the center. Okay? So you have to have people, you have to have wisdom that's being passed down. You have to have the real culture that's being passed down. And when you have a generation above us that came out of the hippie world, okay, and broken homes and broken families and not promoting the traditional, and the kids are looking at this and they say, well, I don't want to be like my parents. You know, I don't want to be divorced and remarried 3 times and have a gazillion stepmothers and stepbrothers. How do I do this? I think Baba and the Mandali were very practical. They laid that out to us. It's not being discussed. It's not being encouraged. The use of Sahavas is an opportunity to do that. But there's other opportunities to do that. And you know, how you do that, I don't know. But I think it's very important. Kids respond to structure and they respond to strength. And we need some strength and confidence in the Baba world. We really do. It's we need some more, you know, chutzpah or a little bit more, you know, down there. Anyways, I've said enough.
Okay. Well, I have very 4 different kind of points that I'll make you brief. We have to mess things up so Baba can have to come back real soon to straighten us out and give us a fresh dispensation. But anyway, as far as being taken advantage of, one of the things that I have seen in the community everywhere, not just in this community, doesn't matter what church or non-church, is that sometimes you realize with interactions that someone is really taking advantage of people and they're looking for somebody else to take advantage of. What do you, should you warn At least I think so at times, because I can think of a few situations where someone was really taking advantage in a very negative way of someone else, and we've seen it over and over again. Anyway, most of us are baby boomers, so after the war, many of us, they had to build hospitals and schools all of a sudden because of all these kids coming up all of a sudden. And so we got a lot of baby boomers here because of that surge. In fact, the whole United States is baby boomers. Okay, next thing is the Love God prayer. Now notice that it's plural. Beloved God, help us all. So I feel like whenever we pray to Baba, sometimes we need to realize that we need to include everyone, period, in that thought, in that prayer. Help us all to love you more and more. So I think that's very important, kind of a mindset. I used to just think about myself in terms of loving God, but it's actually help us all. And I think that's it.
All right, thank you. I just returned from Australia with a few others in this room here, and I noticed the difference between the Australian Baba lovers and the Baba lovers in Myrtle Beach.
Really?
Not just the accents, you know. We're driving on the left side of the road. The difference is they seem a little more lighthearted about their love for Baba and following Baba. Like for instance, in the artis in the morning and the afternoon, there was after the prayers, there was singing. There were lots of singing. There was lots of playing guitars and reciting poetry and just doing some joyous, spontaneous type things. And in fact, there's so many people wanting to do that they had to cut it off and you know, postpone until the next time. So I think what the difference is, they have like a lightheartedness about following Baba. And I think in Myrtle Beach, we tend to be like heavy. It's a heavy thing. It's like, oh, I gotta follow Baba. I don't know, this is hard. But it's. I mean, we all come to Baba and follow Baba in our own way. But I think it's if we become a little more lighthearted about it and not beat up ourselves as much because I can't be that perfect Baba follower. I forgot about Baba today, or I did something wrong. Oh man, I'm bad. But if we can just kind of lighten up on ourselves and realize that we're all on that path and we're going to get there anyway. So just, you know, be cool about it. Thank you.
So I've been thinking a lot about this kind of thing for a few years, and this morning I just tried to jot down some of the ideas that have come to me at different times. And so it all has to do with serving the community, service. You know, it's like, how can we be of service? Because Bob, that's how we can give our love. I mean, it's like to stand over here and just not do anything with my love is like, yeah, the world is falling apart and I'm just standing here doing nothing. You know, I feel like that a lot. And so I'm thinking, okay, what it is not what it is not. Let me think, what should it be? What I want it to be. I want to see a choir in Horry County of kids who are singing uplifting spiritual songs. You know, I don't know how we find them, how we get them together, but I know that we have musicians, I know that we have contacts, I think we can do it. That's one thing. I want to see community gardens somewhere for people that need good food, that need to be able to do something practical for themselves so they can see how they can start to uplift themselves. And we have gardeners. We know how to do gardening. We can do that. And the other thing I think of is water. Water is a real problem. Here we are, you know, right at the beach, and yet our water is terrible. We have to filter it. And a lot of people don't have filters, and they can't afford to continue, you know, pay for water, to have clean water. And especially poor people in this community are going to suffer and have already been suffering from bad water. And so I'm thinking, why not create a lab where we test water? We've got people with brains that know how to do this kind of thing. We can test water, and we can train some high school students during the summers. They can come in as paid interns to learn how to test water all over the county. Why not have testing water? So I don't know. I mean, those are just 3 ideas that I've come up with. I bet you all have all kinds of ideas that we could come up with. But I think we need to find, when we start to put our energy out, we will gain energy. And we will gain young people, because they will be excited to see that there are solutions, and the practicality of it will prove itself. Baba says mysticism is very practical. It's just a practical form of mysticism.
Oh, so many thoughts. Let's see if we can narrow them down. First of all, I want to acknowledge Ben for being a youth and showing up and sharing. When I wrote my book, Waves and Waves of Love, which most of you know about, the last section of it was interviews of the younger generation. And so it went through, started with Elizabeth and Adele and so forth, and went through in the last, towards the end is about the youth. I was blown away by the intelligence and the ideas and the love of Baba. It was all there, and I completely agree that things need to open up in terms of tapping them and inviting them in. And it has, for me, it's been an issue with the center for a long time, feeling like I could break through and make my voice heard, but and not feeling able, which I think in some ways that's guided me towards what I did need to do, and it's guided the circle towards existing. But so I do feel that that's a very, very big piece, and a once-a-year debriefing is not sufficient. So I really hope that the center can open its heart and mind to the community more. But at the same time, things are happening. My niece and nephew also came back from the youth sahavas today, and these were street kids 5 years ago. My brother had died, and their mother had tanked, and she lived in bars, and they lived at friends' houses. And they came to the youth sahavas, and their lives were completely changed, and they were led workshops this weekend. It was very, very cool. And they came back and they said, "Oh, we're having adult sahavas." And I'm like, "Cool." And she says, "Yeah, we're coming down in November. It's going to be for people from 18 to 40. And I'm like, "Huh? What about us?" She says, "Well, you guys can have your own." But at the same time, I mean, I love the idea of the youth leading a sahavas for us old users. Gabe Wood said to me, "I think we need an old geezers sahavas," and I think he meant our generation, but I thought it was great. So I would like to see us do more of these, and I'm grateful, not only for getting these dialogues going. I don't even know if this is a function of the center or just your own interest or the circle. I don't.
Or the board. This is nothing to do with the circle, nothing to do with the center. And the idea was
we're only facilitating it as a place. It's
I
a
love
dialogue
for having a dialogue between the Baba people.
Well,
and so,
it's really, really needed. And on the one hand, I want to see that more. I want to see the youth brought into the programs. I want to see the youth be respected in terms of the intelligence and the skill that they've got. But at the same time, I'm saying, you know how Baba works, the fact that I didn't feel an open door led me to work on my book. And now I've got a new project that I'm working on, which I'm very excited about, which is starting a retreat center in Assisi, a Baba center. So it's not really a major, well, we're just working on it. We're just talking about it, okay? But there's not a major center in Europe. And so, but the point is, we all have seeds in our hearts. And I think probably all of us go, Baba, what do you want me to do? What can I do? How can I serve you? And so I just would want to encourage everybody, keep asking that and trying out things. You know, go do what your heart says to do and serve, you know, do water testing and start youth groups and whatever you want to do. But, and like, I know when the circle started here and they were going to get a place in the mall, I was like, that's ridiculous, right? Y'all might remember. And I was really wrong. And that really taught me how important it is to encourage each other in the places where we feel, where every person feels in their hearts that they have a place where they want to serve or something they want to start or that something they want to do. And so, and I really thank you for wanting to start a dialogue, because we're all over the place with things here, but it's an opportunity to just start launching things and connecting. And so thank you to you, Merwan. Thank you to the circle.
And the idea of the head and the heart, mind and the heart, and organizations and our individual path. There's a expression in India, it takes a thorn to remove a thorn. You know, to use the mind to remove the mind. And there was something that really struck me in Baba's 56th visit in the barn when he addressed the group in the barn saying, I want to make one point, I want to emphasize one point, and it's the same point I made in Andhra. And you probably know that Andhra is the mind for Baba and Hamirpur is the heart. So in coming to America, he was addressing the mind. And the mind is where we create most of our problems, not all of our problems. And so when Baba made that expression, he said, I want to make one point, I want to emphasize one point. I don't have any centers, I don't need any centers. My center's in the heart of my lovers. Anyone who loves me in their heart is my center. But then, he says secondarily, it's good to have a central office and a group head with a caveat, for those who want to spread my message of love and truth, it's good to have a central office. And then he says, like their spiritual center, which stretches for many miles. How many people, think in terms of it just being the 500 acres, and how many think of it as being many miles long? The point is, sahavas is defined as doing things in the presence of the master. Baba says that he's always present in the center, and actually he said, when Elizabeth offered him the property, everything you describe about Myrtle Beach, I personally and spiritually sanction and approve of. And I ask all my lovers to cooperate to make Myrtle Beach the spiritual abode for one and all. And so Baba is conducting his sahavas here all the time. Alan Levinson mentioned when we were talking how many people are coming to the center. Well, how many people are coming to Myrtle Beach? They're coming for rest and recuperation. And they're doing it in a place that Baba is sanctified by his presence throughout Myrtle Beach. Both in 52 and 56, he went to Brook Green Gardens. But the next point he made was that it's important to be cooperative and tolerant and not try to win over other members. The interesting thing is I reflected on that he wanted to emphasize one point. One point he wants to emphasize is the center in his heart, and it's just between each individual and Baba. But that's, if we realize that, we're enlightened. Unfortunately, we're in the world, and in the world we're social beings, and we have organizational connections. And an organization, in order to create an organization, you've got to distinguish this organization from that organization. And that means rules, conceptual frameworks, this is the way we do it, we don't do it that way. And you choose what is the way that's comfortable to you. And the point that I'm making in that in terms of what Bob was advising was, if we look to our own experience and our own heart, that's the way that we can relate to an organization and not have our heart damaged. Because if the mind dominates, if the organization dominates hearts, it hurts hearts. If the heart dominates, people's hearts are protected. And I've seen many people, myself included, that get their hearts damaged because, oh, they don't let me do this, or they don't let me do that, or I can't do this. And the way that I've explained that in my own mind is because organizations are mental, they don't have a heart. People have hearts. And so when we interact with an organization, we need to interact with people within the organization as people, not projecting the organization on that person. Because if we project the organization on that person, then they become rule enforcers or this, and we're dehumanizing them. And by the same token, when people in an organization become to identify themselves because of the expectations that they get, that they're rule enforcers, that they have power, that keeps them from being human. So it's our own personal responsibility to relate to people as, and this is Baba's point that he wants to emphasize, is that what is important is our heart, and we need to take recourse. Somebody talked about self-respect. We respect ourselves, and we respect other people, and engage on a personal level, even if it's in an organizational context.
Okay, just to speak to the point that Jonathan just made, I'm the secretary of the Circle of Friends, and I find that I get too wrapped up in activity, and sometimes I just have to step back and try to remember Baba. And that can be an omnipresent problem. And also, I also just came back from Australia, and I was part of that sahavas, and it was wonderful. It was lovely. They really extended themselves, and it was full of entertainment and creativity and all kinds of stuff. But one thing I did notice is it was cram-packed with events from morning to evening, late to 9 o'clock. And there were events scheduled, simultaneously, where, yeah, I mean, it was lovely, but it was also crazy. And I would suggest for sahavasas in general that there be, more periods of quiet time just to commune with Baba, because this world is so busy. It's so easy to get wrapped up in what we have to do and all the stuff that we need to accomplish. It's really hard to get quiet time sometimes. It is for me. So that's my point.
A couple of things I wanted to just mention. First of all, I thought it was extremely captivating what you were saying about that, guess what, we're not likely to achieve God realization this lifetime. When we talk about the youth...
Excuse me, that's not a message from Baba or anything, okay?
I'm directly quoting. Yes. I found it very compelling to consider, we're talking on and on about the youth, and actually what we're talking about is our own future. I mean, this is us coming back again. What is the world that we're creating if we're talking about the youth and we're over here like we're the old people and they're gonna... But we're talking about getting reborn at some point, and what world do we come into if we haven't passed down that information? We'll come back, we have to find Baba all over again, as if it's brand new. The other thing I wanted to just mention about youth was that those who are quote-unquote in charge at the center and what have you, how did they get to be in that position? How were they treated as youth? And how are we treating our youth, in comparison? And I think, a lot of the folks who are currently in charge, shall we put it, they came in their 20s and they just took on jobs, and next thing you know, they're responsible, and now they're responsible for the next 50 years, and they're not letting go of any responsibilities. That's it. This person is in charge, that's it. And when they pass or drop the bucket or whatever, and they get sick or whatever, that's it. They haven't trained anybody. They haven't put the responsibility on anybody new. They don't want anybody coming in and changing things. And, like Carolyn mentioned, it's very hard as a 20-year Baba lover like me to insert myself somehow. I'm not encouraged. My enthusiasm is not needed. Thank you very much. And I have to put my enthusiasm somewhere else. So what does that say about including the youth? We're not even talking about the youth. We're talking about us. We're not included. So back to, those 2 points are kind of related. We're talking about us. The youth is us now, and the youth is us in the future. And that's very compelling to consider. I think those are very interesting questions.
Speak up, share, be happy. Speak up.
Oh, that's mine.
Okay, what?
Just a minute. I used to teach 4th grade high school, and I can make myself heard without anything, and we all can, even if my own teeth are falling out. Jay Baba, he says, be happy. And I like what everybody said about connecting more. Loud or quiet, or whatever way. Jay Baba.
She didn't need the card. She didn't need the card.
You are her straight man.
Mani wrote the family letters. What is the family she was referring to?
That's a good point.
That's the entire family we create. That's the family we're talking about. And that's why we're having this discussion in a way.
We're having a family discussion. I like that.
Family.
Good. Okay. Circle of friends should invite younger generations to have their own Baba meetings, even if it takes pizza and beers.
Beer. I don't know that I really have anything. Can you hear me? I don't know that I need this because I teach 5th grade, so I can say that. So I was born into a Baba family. Both my parents met Mayor Baba, and my father filmed East West Gathering. My mother met Baba here at both times when he was here, and so we grew up totally devoted to Mayor Baba. And when we were young and we learned about St. Francis of Assisi, and that Baba said, if you could love me like Francis did, that you would please and realize me, then my life was completely focused on Francis. Not in any way, I didn't even know at that time that the Catholic Church existed, but I knew that Francis existed and that was my example. So the love and service that you were speaking of, and I'm sorry I don't know your name, is what fired me up as a young person, always trying to put love and service and Baba into every action. And I think that my feeling as a young person is that it's like many of you said, people feel that love, they're swept by it. Baba turns the key. Mayor Baba decides what's our timing, which youth come. And our job is just, I was surrounded by people, I did get to meet Mayor and Mani, but I was already hooked. That was a very additional hook, that was a help. But all of the work is just sort of seeing that Baba is in action. The mastery and servitude is physically lived every day, and that when you get those ideas, that people want to join, people want to do something, and if that's and there are people who don't have the idea but want to connect with that idea, and they may never even hear Baba's name, they may never even know that's Mayor Baba, but it's that message and that living, that living love, putting the love in action. They may never know that, you're serving people who've had tremendous trauma. And so I have lots of nonprofits that I work with in San Francisco and in other places, and Sufism has its own nonprofits that are entirely service-based, and people never know, they never connect it with Mayor Baba. They just know that it's love in action, and and that is all they really need to know, because then it's easy for them to put that into their community. So every single thing all of you said, me saying saying it's been a privilege to have been invited. I can't thank you enough, Dennis, but I just thought it seems to me that you have so much focus and so much deep-rooted love in Meribaba that people feel that, they know that, and you shouldn't feel like I think all of you within your own circle, and it's just sort of it feels to me like, 69 Darshan in this room, and I was only 9 at the time, but I'm just saying it's very present, and all of you are very inspiring to be with, and I don't exactly have a point that needs to be number 45, except to say that it's a huge privilege to get to see people I've heard about and known about, and just to say bravo. I would put my shoulder to the projects that you've outlined 100%.
I can put point number 46 if you want to stay away from 45.
Forgive me, I can't resist this, but for those of you who are compelled to service, it just so happens that this young lady and that young gentleman are involved in a service project right now in Myrtle Beach to feed students and their families who might be nutritionally deprived over the summer while schools are closed. So if that's the sort of thing that interests you, that you might want to volunteer from, please speak to one of these two people.
Teeny, I don't need a microphone.
Then say it loud.
My only comment is, as a person that grew up in this community from the African American side of town, which was uniquely separated from the rest of town, and involving in a lot of volunteer work even as a child, because my grandmother's in the historic community and she was very much founding education in the black community here. It was okay with all the Baba lovers that were out doing all the work. Nobody ever said anything about Mir Baba except one kid actually gave me a brochure about Mir Baba, okay? And I do believe it's important that people know about Baba. I do. I come from that place of knowing that had I not received that brochure, that was the 7 realities in how to love God, I probably would have continued on just like most of the people in this town that were exposed to Mir Baba, but didn't know it was Mir Baba. Now granted, as soon as I got involved, Elizabeth was take that brochure off. You're not allowed to wear that to high school, the Baba buttons and all those things, because kids did pick on the Baba kids. But it was important to get that literature. So, even if you're not like out putting big banners everywhere, a lot of the other kids felt like they were not allowed to find out about Baba. That they weren't invited into the all-white club. Okay? And I just need to put that out there as well. So if you're going to, it's okay to talk about Baba. And it's okay to give someone a card. And it's okay to, because look at this group. We're, for me, the least diverse spiritual group I know. The least diverse spiritual group. And I'm here, but it is one of the least diverse. Side groups, even the other groups in Florida and stuff. The Krishna community has a much larger African American presence. And I know that. I sent Tori to Krishna school when we lived in Florida, in Texas. So I'm just putting that out there. Even the Sufis, there's only 5 of them. So it's okay to talk about Baba and to say his name and to put it out there as this is what Baba, this is how we love God through Baba, by serving each other, serving humanity.
Thank you. Ben. Ben wishes.
Baba had said that he hasn't come to establish any religion. And he had mentioned, Baba had said also that keep the religion that you are were born. I mean, if you were born in a Jewish family, stay Jewish and do whatever the ceremony is. And he had says that he had come to awaken and not to teach. So I think we have to respect that because we don't want, I mean, I don't think Baba wants to form any religion. It's just a matter of awakening the spirit. And just based on the conversation here, I thought that maybe having a radio station, few hours a day, will be a good thing to have people to kind of know who is Meher Baba is, because many people know about the center here in Myrtle Beach, but they don't know, they don't go and Google it or search it or anything like that. But like a radio station, which says, you know, somebody can just read discourses on it, or how to love God and Baba's basic teaching and all that. I think it's a good idea if it's not too expensive, I don't know.
Very briefly, I like what I heard about giving Baba information to people, but I also think Baba's love spreads from heart to heart in silence. And that, you know, that's what Baba is about too. So there's a balance. And I think each one of us has to kind of be sensitive to the other people, how we express that love to them. Because for some people, I can share Baba's love without saying his name. And if I start to tell them about Baba, they might misunderstand. And the last thing is, and this would be the subject of another group gathering, is what are we going to do if in another year or 6 months, all of a sudden, everybody finds out about Baba and they all descend on Myrtle Beach, and then what are we going to do?
No, we're going to be party. That's Baba's problem. That's Baba's problem.
I'll give you that. Would you like to kind of cap it off with next steps?
Okay, so I guess the thought is, well, first I hope everybody got a chance to speak their minds. I mean, the idea is to communicate. And so in this day and age, and I firmly believe that transparency and communication is the way to go. The more we communicate with each other, the better off we'll be understanding each other. And so that's what we need to do. Also at the same time, we need to be keep the organization as transparent as possible so we know what is going on. And that's the other idea also. So hopefully everybody got a chance to kind of speak their minds. What we'll do is we'll kind of make this available to anybody who wants to kind of do anything with that. I guess I can go ahead and give you my email address also if you want to kind of send me something later on. That might be a way to go. So if you want to just email me and let me know something that you have not kind of been able to do that, and I'll kind of distribute it to Dennis and the others also. The other thing is, it truly is up to you. Do you think we should have this kind of discussions maybe once every 6 months or every maybe 4 months? And that might be the way to go. So if, and I truly believe the center, the circle here is doing an excellent job. And I hope the center supports the circle in some way more. In some ways, the circle is doing the service part of what the center does. I mean, the center does some kind of things there, but this is a great way to partner with the center to make it happen. And the thought here is all of us, when I say all of us, the circle, the center, even the Sufis, I mean, all of us are kind of headed in Baba's direction. So it behooves us to understand each other, respect each other, and really kind of communicate with each other to get the best out of this whole thing. Until we finally make it to the 7th plane, I guess. Till that time, none of us are perfect, and so we need to keep that in mind. We need to kind of make sure we keep moving in the same direction. So if that's what you want, maybe in another 4 months or so, Dennis can arrange a similar meeting and we can kind of go from there. In the meantime, if you have any other thoughts, kind of please email me and let me know.